Hi, welcome back to CRYPTID'S Den. I want to be real with you. It's been a bit quiet here lately, and I felt it. This channel has always meant more to me than just posting videos. It's about connection, shared curiosity, and the little community we've built together. So if you're watching this, I truly hope you'll take a moment to say hi in the comments. Let me know where you're from, or what's been on your mind. And if you haven't yet, subscribing really does help keep this space alive. Now, let's get into it. My 5-year-old daughter looked at me one evening and said, "Mom, someone's playing on the swing at night." At first, I smiled, thinking it was just her imagination. But something in the forest shifted after that. The swing began to move when there was no wind. Little handmade gifts appeared on our porch in exchange for the pebbles and toys my daughters left behind. And then my older daughter drew him, a giant with no eyes, but a kind, quiet smile. It turns out Bigfoot is real, not a monster, not a myth, just a lonely child who danced and played from a distance. His name, we called him Lark, and his mother, I saw her once watching my daughters sleep. At first, I was terrified, but deep down, I knew. She wasn't here to harm us. She was a mother, just like me, protecting what she loved. For 6 months in the deep woods, we shared something unspoken, a fragile connection between two families, one human, one wild. No words, no touch, just quiet understanding. But it didn't last. One night, something changed. A large, aggressive male appeared. And Lark, he stepped between us and his own father. His mother, she made a choice. To keep us safe, she let him go. After that, the forest went still. No more gifts, no footprints, no one on the swing, until the first snow came. I looked outside, the swing was moving again. And on the porch, a carved wooden statue, a mother holding her child. Their final gift, their final goodbye. And I've never stopped wondering, did we imagine it, or were we simply the only ones willing to see? We came to Hollow Cedar because we had nowhere else to go. Portland chewed us up and spat us out. Jared lost the garage. I lost the school job. One minute we were a normal family with 2 daughters and a mortgage, and the next we were selling off furniture just to buy gas for the U-Haul. The house we moved into was Jared's uncle's old place. Abandoned after a stroke put him in assisted care. Tucked between brittle cedar trees and a rusted wire fence, it looked more like a forgotten memory than a home. The porch sagged, the front door stuck, the roof had patches, but the air smelled like pine needles and wet dirt, and we told ourselves that was peace. Evie and June didn't understand the word bankruptcy. They just knew their beds weren't in the same rooms anymore, and the neighbors didn't wave. But they made the best of it. 2 little girls running barefoot through weeds taller than their knees, pretending the world hadn't just fallen apart. Jared got busy right away, fixing gutters, replacing floorboards, mumbling to himself about mold and raccoons. I tried to help, but there were days I didn't even want to brush my hair. I was tired in a way that didn't have words, tired in my bones, in the color behind my eyes. It was June who noticed it first. She came into our room one night, dragging her stuffed rabbit, cheeks pink with sleep. She tugged at the hem of my shirt. "There's someone outside," she whispered. "By the swing. They're smiling at me." I told myself it was just a shadow, just a dream, just a 5-year-old's mind working overtime because we'd turned her life inside out. I kissed her forehead and tucked her back into bed. But I stayed up after that, staring through the blinds like they owed me answers. The swing had been there when we moved in. Just a plank of wood and rope, hanging from an old birch tree. It creaked sometimes, even when the wind didn't blow. But this was the countryside. Trees made noise. The woods had a heartbeat of their own. At least that's what I kept telling myself. A few days later, I found Evie's sketchbook lying open on the kitchen table. She'd drawn a figure, huge, looming, arms too long, shoulders hunched like it didn't know how to stand all the way up. It had no eyes, just empty space where a face showed been. I asked her what it was. She shrugged. Something I saw in the woods. My hand tightened on the page. Evie, you shouldn't make up scary stories, okay? Your sister might believe them. She looked at me, really looked, and said quietly, I didn't make it up. Jared didn't hear that part. He was too busy cursing at the garbage disposal under the sink. Later that night, I checked on the girls like always. June was asleep, curled up like a comma, her small body lost in oversized sheets. The baby monitor blinked on my nightstand. Static, then a faint hum, then silence, and then the swing moved. Not wildly. Not like in horror movies, just a slow, gentle sway. Back and forth, back and forth. The trees were still. The leaves didn't flutter. The air outside was dead calm. I watched the monitor until my eyes blurred, waiting for a gust of wind, a raccoon, a reason. There wasn't one. I didn't wake Jared. I didn't scream. I just sat there, pulse throbbing in my neck, ears straining for any sound beyond the soft creak of rope on branch. The next morning, I didn't mention it. Instead, I poured cereal, packed school lunches, and acted like a woman who hadn't watched something impossible happen in real time. Claire the mother. Claire the reliable. Claire who didn't scare her children with ghost stories. June came into the kitchen, wearing mismatched socks, and said it again. He was on the swing last night. But he didn't talk. He just watched. My voice came out too sharp. June, we don't talk about made-up friends at the table. She blinked at me, then looked down at her spoon, stirring loops into milk. That afternoon, I found her sitting near the swing, legs crossed, eyes focused on nothing in particular. She was humming to herself. He was humming to herself. Every so often, she'd glance to her left, like someone was there. I almost called out to her, but stopped. She wasn't afraid. That hit me harder than anything. I stood at the kitchen window that evening, dishes half-washed in the sink. The forest beyond the backyard stretched out in layers of gray and green, shadows bleeding into one another. And somewhere deep in that quiet, I felt it. Something watching. Not with menace, but with interest, like it was waiting to see what would do next. Jared came up behind me, kissed my shoulder, didn't ask what I was staring at. He never did. He had his own ghost to wrestle, hidden in rusted pipes and rotted beams. That night, after everyone else had gone to bed, I sat alone on the couch. No TV, no lights, just me in the dark. My eyes drifted to the woods again, past the edge of our yard, past the swing. It was too dark to see clearly, but I felt the weight of something looking back. Not moving, not threatening, just there. And the strangest thing, I was too tired to be scared. It started as a game. One of those harmless things kids do when they're bored and surrounded by too much open space and not enough people. Evie called it mirror walking. She'd pretend to trip, fall onto the grass, then glance sideways to see if anyone, or anything, was copying her. Most days, it was just June, giggling behind her. But then came the day Evie didn't laugh when she got back up. I was watching through the window, drying a dish without realizing I'd been scrubbing the same spot for too long. Evie faked a tumble, and from the tree line where the forest started to thicken, I saw a flicker of movement, like something bulky and dark mimicking her exactly. Only it didn't land as gracefully. It slipped, hard. I saw dirt scatter, like a knee hit the ground. I dropped the dish, didn't even flinch when it shattered. That night I asked Evie if she'd seen anything unusual. She said, "They're not scary. They're just trying to play right." I didn't push her. Not yet. In the following days, the game kept going. They waved into the woods, danced in circles, took turns tiptoeing across the grass like little shadows of each other. Always with that strange, delayed mimicry from somewhere just beyond sight. It became routine. June started leaving things behind at the swing. Colored stones, old Barbie shoes, a broken wind-up toy she used to love. I figured she was just being 5. But one morning, I found the wind-up toy gone, and in its place sat a clamshell, clean, pale, balanced perfectly on the wooden seat like someone had placed it with care. The next day, the Barbie shoe was gone. In its place, a button. Then, a piece of fishbone, sun-bleached and delicate. A piece of driftwood with what looked like tooth marks. A rusty bell that didn't ring anymore. June thought it was magic. Evie said maybe it was a raccoon with good manners. But something about the precision of it, how each thing felt chosen, it didn't sit right. I didn't interfere, not yet. Instead, I started taking pictures. Every morning before the girls woke, I'd photograph what had been left. I had a whole folder on my phone. I gave it a name I didn't even tell Jared about. Offerings. The forest had gone from background to presence. Like it was breathing against the back of my neck. And the strange part, it wasn't threatening. Strange part, it felt familiar. Curious. As though we were the ones trespassing. As though someone, or something, was trying to understand why we were here at all. One afternoon, Evie K came inside holding her sketchbook, like it was a diary she didn't want read. But she held it out to me anyway, her eyes searching my face. "I didn't draw this," she said. I looked down. It was a drawing of her and June, standing side by side. They were smiling. Their hands were stretched out, and between them was a figure, tall, covered in shaggy fur, with wide, long arms and a gentle tilt to the head. It held both their hands like it belonged there. The weirdest part wasn't that the figure was accurate. It was that the page had a different texture, softer, not her usual sketchbook paper, like the drawing had been slipped in. I asked if maybe June had done it, or one of her school friends. She just shook her head. No one else knows about him. Him. Nodded. I didn't ask what she meant. That night, after they went to bed, I sat on the porch steps. There was no wind. No sound but the low hum of crickets and the occasional rustle from the underbrush. I left nothing out, just sat with my arms around my knees and stared at the swing. It didn't move. Not even once. But I could feel something watching, not studying, not hunting, just hoping, waiting for us to understand. The next morning, June was quiet, not in a sulking kind of way, but like she had something pressing on her chest. She sat on the back steps, her knees pulled up, a stone clutched tight in her hand. It was one of the ones she'd gotten from the swing, a red speckled river rock, warm from her touch. I saw her dig a small hole near the rosebush and place it inside, gently, like she was tucking someone in. "What are you doing?" I asked softly. She looked up at me and whispered, "I don't want to lose him." I didn't know what to say. So I just sat beside her, fingers brushing the dirt she'd patted smooth. Something was building, something just under the surface of all of this. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was like anticipation. Like we'd started a conversation in a language we didn't speak. And somehow, the answers were arriving anyway. That night, I scrolled through the photos in my offerings folder. Each object, each exchange. I zoomed in on the clamshell, the bell, the little X-shaped scratch on the driftwood. They felt like fingerprints. Not literal ones, but pieces of someone's childhood. Someone who hadn't forgotten what it was like to be a child. I thought of Evie's drawing. I thought of that slow fall in the woods. That thing trying to imitate play. Trying to do it right. And I couldn't stop wondering. What happens when a creature that doesn't speak your language tries to say hello? What happens if you answer back? I didn't sleep well that night. My dreams were filled with thudding footsteps, moss-covered hands, the scent of cedar and wet soil. But there was warmth in them, too. A strange comfort, like something ancient and quiet had finally found someone who listened. The forest outside our windows wasn't just wild anymore. It was paying attention, and so were we. I was knitting by the window. That's how it started. Just something to keep my hands busy. Something quiet. Repetitive. Yarn sliding over needles like breath. Loop, pull, loop. The girls were upstairs. Evie was drawing again. June was probably asleep, curled around her rack. Jared was working on the back fence, cursing softly every few minutes. And I was there in the dim light, trying to pretend I was still a person who knew how to finish things. The porch light flickered once. I looked up, and it was there, outside the window, behind the glass of June's room, not moving, not breathing, just watching. A figure, taller than any man I've ever known, shoulders too broad, shape not human, not exactly. Coarse brown, fur-lit silver by the porch glow. Eyes like nothing I've ever seen, because there were none. I froze. Yarn slipped off the needle. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. The moment stretched so long, I forgot how to blink. It didn't snarl. It didn't move. It didn't even press forward. It just stood there, head slightly tilted, like it was curious. Like it was waiting to see what I'd do with the fear rising like bile in my throat. I blinked, and it was gone, just like that. 1 second it was a figure behind the glass, and the next it was a breeze rustling the curtains, a shadow sinking into the trees. I didn't call the police. I don't know why. I didn't wake Jared. I just sat there, shaking, hands clenched in my lap, eyes on the dark forest beyond the swing. And the strangest part, I wasn't terrified. My heart pounded, yes, but there wasn't rage or dread or that crushing, suffocating sense that something evil had peered in. It was different. A memory came unbidden. June's voice from days ago. Not threatening, watching, understanding maybe. I didn't sleep that night. Morning brought no clarity, but it did bring something else. I stepped outside to hang the laundry, just for something to do. And I found it there in the basket, right on top of June's small sweatshirt, a turtle shell, smooth, yellowed, hollowed out like time had passed through it, and next to it, the yarn had been knitting the night before, my project, neatly wound into a ball, placed to dead center like a quiet apology. No one in the house could have done that. Not Jared, not the girls. I hadn't even told anyone where I left it. But someone had found it, gathered it, left it there like a truce. I stared at it for a long time, then picked it up. The shell was warm, like it had been held. The shell was warm, like it had been held. Something inside me shifted, subtle. A breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for weeks, maybe even longer. That evening, I started a journal. Not a diary. Not a log of chores or grocery lists. Just thoughts, questions, observations. A record, I told myself. Something to tether me to reality in case this whole thing spiraled into something I couldn't explain to Jared without sounding unwell. My first entry was simple. Am I being watched? Or am I being watched? Or am I being understood? The entries came easy after that. I filled pages with notes about the items June left at the swing. The return gifts, Evie's new drawings, now including what she called long hands and shapes that looked suspiciously like letters, but not any alphabet I recognized. I even printed out the photos from my phone and taped them to the inside cover, the clamshell, the bell, a knotted braid of wild grass that looked like it had been made by fingers. And then came Maggie. She showed up like she always did, unannounced, holding a loaf of bread or a jar of something pickled, acting like Hollow Cedar was still the kind of place where neighbors dropped by just to chat. This time, though, she brought something different. An old photograph, faded, wrinkled at the edges. She handed it to me without a word. The photo was from the 1970s. Black and white, kids at a summer camp. Grouped in front of a canoe, all toothy grins and awkward knees. But behind them, partially obscured by trees, was a shape. Large, upright, blurred as though the camera didn't know how to see it clearly. But it was there. Same sloped shoulders. Same thick limbs. I looked up at her. Maggie's face had no smile. Just that worn softness she wore when something hurt deep. "My son," she said quietly. "He took that picture, right before he went missing." My hands clenched tighter around the photo. "He snuck off," she continued. "Told his friends he was going to film it. Said he'd seen it before, watching them at night. He had one of those old handy cams. They found his backpack 3 days later. Just off the trail. Camera was smashed. I didn't ask what else they found. She told me anyway. Shirt torn at the collar. A bone in the leaves. Little one. Looked like a wrist. They couldn't match the DNA. I stared at the photo again. Tried to look past the leaves and into whatever secret that forest had been holding on to for decades. "Do you think it took him?" I asked. Maggie looked at me for a long time, then said something I'll never forget. "No, I think it tried to protect him. I think something else did the taking." I didn't know what that meant then. But I do now. That night, I stood by June's window, not watching, waiting. The trees stood still. Crickets chirped lazily. Nothing moved. Then, a shadow, near the swing. A tall figure, shoulders hunched, head tilted. It raised one hand, slow, deliberate, and rested it against the glass, right where my hand was already pressed. Neither of us moved. Neither of us pulled away. And in that quiet, something passed between us. Not words, not answers, but a knowing. A mother sees another mother and knows. The scream wasn't like anything I'd heard before. It cut straight through the trees, through the drywall, through my skin. Not panicked, not startled. It was raw. Evie's voice from the backyard. Sharp, cracking. Terrified in a way kids shouldn't have to feel. I was on my feet before the plate even hit the floor. I didn't think. I ran. The door flung open, screen slapping behind me. Gravel digging into my heels as I sprinted out into the yard. The grass looked untouched at first. Nothing out of place. But then I saw her. Evie, crouched near the cedar line, sobbing, pointing toward the edge of the woods. And the swing was still moving. "She's gone." She cried. She fell. She was right there. And then... I didn't wait for the rest. My legs carried me into the trees, half tripping over roots, branches whipping at my face. I didn't feel any of it. I was screaming June's name, louder than I'd ever yelled in my life. The forest absorbed it, gave nothing back. My heart was a hammer in my throat, pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Then I saw the break in the ground, a crack, almost hidden beneath dead leaves and ivy. Narrow, but deep enough, like the forest had opened its mouth just long enough to take her in. "June?" My voice shook. I dropped to my knees, peering down. And then something moved, a shape just beyond the opening. Massive, covered in dark fur, shifting in shadow. For a second, I couldn't breathe. My body froze, every instinct screaming at me to run. But then I saw June, cradled, gently, like the thing had caught her. She wasn't crying. She looked stunned, more than anything. Her hair was tangled, a scrape on her cheek, her little fingers gripping a tuft of fur. And then it happened. The figure, huge, silent, bent forward, impossibly careful, and placed her on the mossy ground beside the crack. Set her down like she was something fragile. Then it turned and melted into the trees, gone before my knees even hit the dirt. I pulled her to me, felt her breath, her heartbeat. She was okay. She was okay. She looked up at me with glassy eyes and said, "He didn't let me fall hard." I didn't know what to say. My throat tightened so fast I thought I might choke. We sat there for a long time, my arms around her, the trees creaking above us like old bones shifting in sleep. By the time Jared found us, my jeans were soaked through with dirt and tears, and June had fallen asleep on my chest. I told him she'd slipped, that she must have rolled into the crack and stunned herself. I didn't tell him about the arms, the fur, the quiet way it had placed her down like she was precious. He didn't ask questions, but he didn't really believe me either. That night, he dragged the motion sensor camera out of the garage and set it up at the edge of the yard, angled toward the swing. His hands were tight fists the whole time. He didn't talk. I watched him from the porch, June asleep inside, Evie still rattled and hugging her knees. He didn't believe in monsters, but he believed in trespassers. By morning, the camera was dead. The footage was garbage, flickering static, warped timestamps, no clear images. The sensor logs showed something passed in front of the lens around 2:47 a.m., but nothing was visible. Jared stared at the bent bracket, the twisted mount that looked like it had been squeezed by a hand too big to belong to any human. His mouth tightened. He didn't say it, but I saw it on his face. Someone had been there. Something. Later that day, while packing June's lunch, I found it, tucked neatly between her juice box and peanut butter sandwich. A single berry. It was small, round, deep purple with a shine like polished stone. I didn't recognize it, not from the yard, not from any tree I'd seen around. It looked drawn, like something from one of Evie's sketches. Something too perfect to be real. When I asked June about it, she smiled. "He gave it to me. Said it's safe." Said. She used the word like it had spoken. That night, I stood on the porch again. Alone. I didn't bring a flashlight. Just a paper bag with 2 slices of bread, some bruised apples, and half a granola bar. I didn't think of it as an offering. I thought of it as a thank you. A quiet acknowledgement from one mother to another. I set the bag gently at the base of the steps. Then I sat back down, the air thick with summer heat, the swing creaking once, twice, and going still. The stars were low and sharp above the trees. Somewhere out there, something was watching again. But this time, I didn't feel like prey. I felt seen, known, maybe even trusted. And that was scarier than anything. It's once you realize something wild has noticed your children, not to harm them, but to protect them. Everything you thought you knew about fear gets rewritten. I didn't sleep much that night. Every creak, every sigh of the wind felt like a breath too close. But I wasn't afraid. Not really. Because somewhere in those woods, a stranger had caught my daughter, and gently, so gently, placed her back into the world. The dream was too vivid to ignore. I was walking through the woods again, but it was different this time. Quieter. As if the forest itself had been holding its breath for a very long time. The trees rose tall and sharp like cathedral pillars, all silver-gray bark and slow-moving mist curling at my feet. I didn't know why I was there, only that something was guiding me, tugging at the center of my chest like a string I couldn't see. Then I saw the stones. A small pile, stacked deliberately near the base of an old elm, moss-covered, weather-worn. And resting right on top, bright and heartbreakingly familiar, was the little beaded bracelet Evie had made for June months ago. It had the letter J and a crooked heart and 2 colors of string. One blue, one pink. I knelt beside it. The air smelled of damp pine and something else, something softer, almost like fur after rain. Behind me I felt movement. I turned. The same presence. Massive. Quiet. Watching me not with eyes but with something else. Some kind of weightless knowing. And then I woke up. It was still dark outside. I sat up in bed, heart galloping. fingers curled around the sheets like they were the only thing keeping me in this world. Jared was snoring softly beside me. His arm flopped over his stomach, unaware of what had just clawed its way through my sleep. I got up, walked to the window, stared out at the tree line. I didn't see anything, but I felt it. That presence, lingering like a scent. Later that morning, I went to see Maggie. I didn't plan to. I just ended up on her porch, holding a thermos of coffee I didn't remember filling. She let me in without a word, like she already knew something was shifting. "I had a dream," I said, sitting across from her at the kitchen table, hands tight around the warm mug. She raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. There were stones, and a bracelet Evie made, and something watching me. Maggie exhaled, leaned back in her chair, and rubbed her temples. "She's showing you," she said quietly. "Who? The mother?" My skin prickled. "She's lost one too," Maggie went on. "A long time ago, back before the cold winter of '82. A lot of strange things happened that season. Tracks in the snow that didn't match anything natural. Sounds that came from nowhere. And then silence." She reached into a drawer, pulled out an old photo. Worn, creased, soft at the corners. It showed a hillside dusted with frost, and faint lines crossing through it like seams. "She used to come close to the edge," Maggie said, her voice low. "Let herself be seen. But after that season, she vanished. For years, until now." I swallowed hard. "You think she has... what? Trying to connect?" "No." Her gaze locked with mine. "She's grieving." That night, Evie hung something on the clothesline. Not laundry. Not art. Just a folded piece of paper, clamped between two wooden pins. When I asked her what it was, she just said, "A note." I read it after she went back inside. The letters were crooked, printed carefully in her best handwriting. "We like playing with you. Thank you for being kind. Please don't go away." The next morning, the note was still there, but it had been changed. Not written over, added to. Small sticks had been arranged across the top of the line, bent into strange shapes, half runes, half gestures. Almost like a reply written in the only language they had. Evie smiled when she saw it. June clapped her hands. And for a moment, it felt like the yard was breathing again. Later that day, I found it. On Evie's window. Not words. Not symbols. Just a single dry handprint. Dark, small, dusted in something like rust. It was too high for June to reach. Too defined to be a smudge. The fingers were long. The palm narrow. Not human. I wiped it away before Jared saw. My hand trembled all the way to the sink. I couldn't tell if it was meant to scare us, or warn us, or maybe ask for help. That night, I didn't knit. I didn't read. I sat on the back porch with a flashlight I didn't turn on and a heart that beat too loud in the quiet. And when the wind picked up through the cedars, I whispered toward the dark. "I don't know what you are. But if you lost someone, I understand." My voice cracked. It was the most honest thing I'd said in months. There was no reply, only the silence that falls between two mothers who have lost too much to explain. But somehow, it was enough. The sound came just after dusk. We were finishing dinner. Nothing fancy, just mac and cheese with thawed peas stirred in. When everything outside seemed to stop moving, even the trees, even the swing, and then the roar cut through the stillness like a bone breaking under weight. Not an echo, not a call. It was a command, a declaration. Jared dropped his fork. His eyes locked with mine. Neither of us said it, but we both knew. This wasn't the same as before. He stood slowly, wiped his hands on a towel he didn't need. Evie froze mid-bite. June was already sliding down from her chair, crawling into my lap without a word. We sat like that for a beat, as if staying still might hold the sound at the edge of the woods. Then came the second roar, closer, lower, angry. Jared grabbed the rifle from behind the pantry door. He didn't load it, just chambered a blank and headed out onto the porch. I followed him halfway, heart slamming so hard I thought it might shake the screen door. "You think it's the same one?" I asked. He didn't answer. His eyes were on the trees, and then everything moved. Herds of deer burst from the underbrush, leaping through the clearing like bullets through tall grass. Their hooves drummed across the earth, thudding in waves, eyes wide and wild, mouths open in a silent panic. One clipped the corner of the porch rail as it passed, sending splinters into the dark. And behind them, something else. I didn't see it at first. Just motion, mass. A blur of dark fur and lunging limbs. But then it stepped into the clearing and stopped. It was massive. Taller than the mother, broader across the chest. Its fur wasn't brown like hers. It was darker, almost black, matted in places, torn in others. Its face looked carved out of stone. Flat nose, slitted nostrils, a mouth pulled too far back, and its eyes, they weren't like larks. They were hunting. Jared raised the rifle and fired into the air. The sound cracked through the woods, and for a second, everything stilled. Then, from the side, something stepped between us. Lark. Not tall enough to be intimidating, not broad enough to block, but still, there, arms spread slightly, like a child trying to shield a parent from an oncoming storm. His fur was lighter, younger. He didn't roar, he didn't roar. He just stood. The larger one snarled, teeth bared, chest rising and falling like bellows. Its claws dug into the dirt, legs braced, and then the mother came. The sound she made wasn't a scream. It was grief. Grief and fury braided into one long, echoing wail that cracked straight through the trees. She charged, not at the male, but at Lark. She grabbed him by the arm, yanked him back. Her whole body trembled. She stepped between him and the larger one, planted herself there, low and ready. They stared at each other for what felt like hours. She didn't growl. She didn't fight. She just pushed Lark behind her and never moved again. The male backed off, slowly. Eyes still locked, his breath steaming in the cooling night air. Then he vanished. Back into the woods, swallowed by shadow. The mother didn't turn. She stood there long after he was gone. Then finally, slowly, she turned to Lark and gave a sound I'd never heard before. Not a roar. Not a growl, a goodbye. He didn't want to go. That much was obvious. He reached for her. Small hands curled around her fur. She pulled away. He looked back once, just once, and then disappeared into the trees. And she stayed, alone. We stood on the porch, unmoving. Jared lowered the rifle. June cried quietly into my sweater. Evie just stared, mouth parted, as if words had failed her. The wind returned. The trees moved again. But nothing felt normal. Not anymore. The swing swayed slightly, then stopped. The stars began to poke through the cloud cover, one by one, and the sound of footsteps. The big kind. Faded farther and farther away. Until all we had left was silence. Jared placed a hand on my shoulder. His voice was barely more than a whisper. "She chose," he said. "She made the choice a mother makes." And I nodded, because I understood. And I hated how much I understood. The forest went silent after she left. No creaking branches, no strange calls in the night. Not even the soft shifting of leaves like something too big was moving just beyond the edge of our reach. It had been 3 nights since we saw her, since Lark disappeared into the trees, dragged from our world by a choice no mother should have to make. And somehow the stillness was worse than the noise had ever been. The house didn't feel safer. It felt abandoned. I stopped sleeping, not on purpose. I just couldn't find the rhythm for it anymore. My body lay down, sure, but my mind hovered right at the edge of something open and unfinished. I'd sit in bed and stare at the ceiling, listening to Jared breathe slow and deep beside me, and wonder what it meant when the thing you feared most suddenly stopped looking your way. On the 4th morning, I stepped out onto the porch, barefoot, clutching my mug like it could anchor me, and that's when I saw it. On the clothesline, hung there neatly, like laundry someone meant to dry, was my handkerchief, the one I had lost weeks ago. The one I thought had blown off somewhere behind the shed. It had been washed, folded, and pinned like a small, quiet message. I stared at it for a long time. The mug went cold in my hands. My breath misted in the chill air, even though the sun was rising. I didn't call Jared. I didn't need to. Whatever left that cloth had done it for me, not him. We spent the rest of the morning pretending everything was fine. June helped me knead bread. Evie worked on a clay figurine at the kitchen table. Jared fixed the fence post that had cracked under one of the deer. There was nothing strange about any of it, but we all moved slower, like we were waiting for something that wouldn't come. That evening, June cried. I found her curled up on the floor of the closet, arms around her knees, eyes red and swollen. I think they got him, she whispered. Who? Lark? My throat closed. I wanted to tell her no. I wanted to say he was fine, that he was probably just far away, that maybe he and his mother had gone to someplace safer, quieter. But I couldn't, because I didn't know, and she could always tell when I was lying. So I sat down beside her and said nothing, just held her hand and let the silence stretch. Later that night, I returned to the swing. Alone. I brought nothing with me. No food, no photos, no words, just a single thing. The wool scarf I'd been knitting the night the mother stared in through our window. It was half finished, knotted and crooked and more whole than fabric, but it was something mine, something made during all this. I draped it gently across the swing, careful not to snag it on the rope. And then I placed Evie's little clay figurine beside it. She didn't know I took it. I didn't ask. But it felt right. The next morning, both were gone. No footprints, no scent, no marks on the earth. But something had taken them, accepted them. When I turned the corner of the house later that day, I found it. Behind the garden, near the tree line, something new. A nest, not like a bird's, not small or delicate. It was woven from thick branches, moss, bark, strands of long brown hair, bits of fabric I recognized, scraps from Evie's pajama pants, a piece of June's old pillowcase, even a button from Jared's flannel shirt. It wasn't haphazard. It was arranged, built. And in the middle sat every gift we'd been given. The bell, the fishbone, the polished clamshell, the sketch I hadn't seen since Evie first showed me. All together, all arranged in a kind of circle, like a memory or a farewell. I couldn't move. My hand covered my mouth, and tears came before I could stop them. It wasn't grief. Not exactly. It was the ache of something left unfinished. That night, I didn't go to the porch. I sat by the back window instead. Lights off, wrapped in the quilt my grandmother made. I watched the tree line, my breath fogging the glass, and whispered something I wasn't sure anyone, or anything, could hear. I know you had to go. No answer came, but I didn't expect one. I stayed there until dawn, just waiting for the swing to move, waiting for the woods to breathe again. They didn't, but I'd learned by now that just because you couldn't see something didn't mean it wasn't there. The wind shifted just before sunrise. A cold breeze, faint and sudden, carrying the smell of cedar and ash and something older. And I whispered one more thing. Your child left a piece of themselves here. I didn't say thank you. I didn't say goodbye. Because it didn't feel like the end. Not yet. It snowed for the first time that morning. Soft, slow, almost apologetic. Like the sky had been holding its breath for weeks and finally decided to exhale. I stood at the window, my coffee forgotten on the sill, and watched the flakes drift down onto the porch rail, catching on the rusted nail heads and the edge of June's forgotten rain boots. The swing moved, just barely. A gentle creak. A gentle creak. The rope stretching as if pulled by fingers too light to see. There was no wind, no animal, no weight I could name. But something was there. I didn't flinch this time. I didn't tell myself I imagined it. I just breathed in slowly and whispered, I know. Jared came up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist like he always used to before all of this. Before the forest noticed us, before silence had weight and shadows had names. He looked out the window and didn't say anything. I think he saw it too. He just didn't want to be the first to admit it. That afternoon, we rebuilt the swing. The old rope had started to fray. Jared replaced it with thick nylon, bright white against the dark wood, and Evie helped sand down the seat. June tied a blue ribbon to the branch above, said it was for good swings only. I didn't ask what that meant. I think she didn't really know either. We just let it be. Then we made something else. An altar, maybe. A tribute. A memory. We found a spot near the tree line where the soil still remembered where they'd walked. We drove a wooden post into the ground. Just a piece of driftwood from the creek, shaped like a crooked finger pointing toward the hills. On it we tied the half-finished scarf. Evie placed her second clay figure beside it. This one more careful, with tiny indentations for eyes, and a little dent in the chest, like a wound. And Jared dug out an old bird feeder from the shed, filled it with bruised apples and breadcrumbs and honey. Not as an offering, more like a message. We remember. That night, Jared told the girls a story. We sat by the fireplace, the storm rolling and soft over the hills, and he spoke low and steady, like he was reading it from inside his chest. He told them about the friends who lived in the woods, about a creature who knew how to laugh without a voice, how to play without a name, how to love without needing anything back. He told them about a mother who watched from the trees and chose something no one could understand. And the girls listened. No questions, just quiet. I stepped outside sometime after midnight. The snow was deeper now, soft against my ankles. It made no sound as I crossed the yard. The swing still, the sky full of silver clouds. I left one last thing on the porch step. A woven basket filled with stale crackers, a dented thermos of warm broth, and a few strawberries we'd been saving in the freezer. I didn't know if it would be taken. I didn't know if it even mattered anymore. But I left it anyway. And when I turned to go back inside, I saw it, sitting in the snow, where no one could have walked without leaving prints. A figure, carved in wood, rude but deliberate. A woman, tall, sturdy, shoulders bent not from weakness, but from carrying something precious. In her arms, curled close, safe, was a child. It had been shaped with claws. I could see the grooves where each fingertip had dug into the bark. No eyes, no mouth, but it didn't need them. I felt what it was trying to say. I lifted it gently. It was warm, like it had been held all night. Inside, I sat on the edge of our bed and cradled the statue in my lap like it was breakable. I don't know how long I stayed there. The fire dimmed. The clock ticked too loud. But for the first time since we arrived in Hollow Cedar, I didn't feel alone. Not in the aching kind of way. Not in the screaming into a vacuum kind of way. I felt accompanied, witnessed. June stirred in her room. Evie turned in her sleep. Jared exhaled like the air in his lungs had been heavy for weeks and finally gave way. And I whispered something to no one. Thank you for letting us matter. Thank you for letting us matter. Outside, the snow kept falling. And somewhere, deep beyond the trees, something watched just long enough to know we were okay. There are stories that never make the news. No headlines, no proof. Just quiet things passed down in glances, in memories, in the spaces where words fail and feeling steps in. These stories aren't about monsters. They're about understanding, about the thin, trembling thread that can still connect two worlds, even if those worlds were never meant to touch. In the wild places, in the corners of this country where the trees grow old and the nights grow long, there are truths we don't write down. Not because they aren't real, but because they ask us to listen in a different way, to trust what we feel more than what we see, to believe in the possibility of empathy even across impossible distances. There's something sacred in that, something achingly human. Sometimes, what looks like fear is just unfamiliarity. Sometimes, what lies in the dark isn't darkness itself, but something that mourns, that remembers, that hopes. And maybe, just maybe, the question isn't what's out there, but who has the courage to see it without needing to explain it, to look at something unknown and choose compassion over control. Curiosity over conquest. Presence over proof. What we leave behind in this world, our grief, our love, our mistakes, our attempts to do better, they echo, not always in the ways we expect, not always in the places we're looking, but they echo. In every child that learns to wonder, in every stranger that chooses kindness, in every silence that holds more than absence, it holds memory. And when the wind moves through the trees in the dead of winter, when the snow falls quiet over a place that once held something no one could name, maybe that's the point. That not everything is meant to be solved. Some things are meant to be witnessed, to be honored, and to be remembered. Thank you for walking this path with us, through the shadows, through the stillness, and through something far more tender than fear. If this story moved you, if it stirred something in the quiet places of your heart, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. We would love to hear what you felt, what you saw between the lines. And if you'd like to keep exploring these strange, fragile intersections between what is and what might be, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay close. Because the woods are never truly silent, and some stories are still waiting to be told.